Captain Zexhari had seen many strange things in his 40 years of service with the Galactic Survey Fleet, but nothing quite like this. His ship, the Stellar Wind, drifted quietly at the edge of what the star charts called Sol System, a backwater collection of planets orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. "Sir, we're picking up something unusual," reported his sensor operator, a young officer whose purple skin showed the nervous color shifts typical of his species. "There's a vessel approximately 2 million kilometers ahead. It's not moving." Zexhari leaned forward in his command chair, his 4 eyes focusing on the main display. "Pirates? No, sir. The energy signature is completely unknown. It's not matching any ship design in our database." The captain's curiosity sparked. In all his years exploring the Outer Rim territories, discovering a new ship design was rare. Most civilizations followed similar engineering principles: sleek hulls for maximum efficiency, energy weapons for clean kills, and lightweight materials for speed. "Bring us closer, slowly." As they approached, the mystery deepened. The ship looked like someone had taken a chunk of dark metal and roughly shaped it into something that might fly. It was blocky, angular, and covered in what looked like scorch marks and dents. Parts of its hull were actually patched with different materials, as if repairs had been made during combat. "What kind of civilization builds ships like that?" muttered the navigation officer. "One that expects to get shot at," Zexhari replied quietly. The sensor operator's skin was now flickering between nervous purple and confused orange. "Captain, I'm reading massive internal damage throughout the vessel. Hull breaches in 17 sections, but sir ... The ship is intact. Whatever hit it should have broken it apart." "Life signs? None currently. But Captain, there are power readings coming from 3 different sections. Backup systems are still running even though the main power core appears to be dead." Zexhari had never heard of a ship with so many backup systems. Most vessels had 1, maybe 2 emergency power sources. This thing seemed to have backups for... "It's backups, sir. I'm detecting something else. The ship's weapons are still partially charged. Even damaged like this, it could still fight." That sent a chill through the bridge crew. What kind of beings built a ship that could take that much? Punishment and still pose a threat? "Run a deep scan," Zexhari ordered. "I want to know everything about this vessel. Who built it, what it's made of, and where it came from." The scanning beams reached out, penetrating deep into the unknown ship's structure. What they found would change everything. The hull wasn't just thick, it was impossibly thick. Layer after layer of metal, ceramics, and materials the scanner couldn't even identify. The ship had been built to absorb punishment that would vaporize most vessels. Even more puzzling, the damage patterns showed this ship had been in multiple battles, not just one. "Captain," the sensor operator's voice was barely a whisper, "look at these weapon mounting points." The display showed the ship's armament. The weapons were crude compared to galactic standard: chemical propellants instead of pure energy, kinetic rounds instead of plasma bolts. But there were so many of them. Every surface that could mount a weapon had one. The ship looked like it had been designed by someone who believed in overwhelming firepower over elegant solutions. "These aren't exploration tools," noted the tactical officer. "This entire vessel is built for war." But the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. The scanner penetrated the ship's interior, revealing corridors, chambers, and systems that defied logic. The medical bay was enormous, far larger than any exploration vessel would need. The walls showed residue that their computers identified as biological matter. "Sir, these readings, they suggest medical procedures were performed while the ship was under attack. Emergency surgery, amputation, blood transfusions, all while fighting." Zexhari felt his stomach twist. What kind of beings continued medical operations during combat? The crew quarters told an even more disturbing story. Personal items were secured with military precision, but many surfaces showed impact damage and what appeared to be dried blood. Yet the quarters had been lived in, fought from, and somehow the occupants had continued their duties. "Captain, you need to see this," called the communications officer. I've managed to access some of their data storage. The ship's designation translates to something like UES Defiance, and it's classified as a patrol vessel. Patrol vessel? Zexhari's voice cracked slightly. This thing is built like a fortress, and you're telling me it's not even a warship? That's what their files indicate, sir. According to the data, this was considered a light patrol craft assigned to routine border security. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. If this was what they considered a light patrol ship, what did their actual warships look like? Sir, there's more. I'm finding references to something called Earth in their navigation system. It appears to be the third planet in this system. All eyes turned to the main display, where a small blue and green world hung peacefully in space. Zexhari had reviewed the initial survey reports years ago. The planet was listed as inhabited by a primitive species that had barely achieved chemical rockets. They were considered harmless, too primitive to be a threat, too underdeveloped to be worth contacting. That can't be right, the tactical officer protested. We surveyed that world. They don't even have proper spaceflight. But the evidence was undeniable. The damaged ship came from the primitive world below. Somehow, the species they had dismissed as backward had built this floating fortress and sent it into space. Captain, the sensor operator's voice was shaking. Now I'm detecting more ships. The display updated, showing dozens of similar vessels moving through the outer system. Some were even larger than the Defiance. They moved in coordinated patterns, clearly following military protocols. How did we miss this? Zexhari demanded. Sir, they're using minimal energy signatures. Their ships run quiet unless they're in combat. Our long-range scans wouldn't have detected them unless we looked specifically for this type of technology. As they watched, one of the distant ships changed course and began moving toward them. Not quickly, but with clear purpose. They know we're here, whispered the navigation officer. Zexhari made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Instead of fleeing or preparing for battle, he ordered his crew to continue scanning the Defiance. They needed to understand what they were dealing with. The final scan results were the most terrifying of all. Deep in the ship's database, they found records of recent engagements. The Defiance hadn't been alone when it was damaged. It had been part of a small human fleet that had encountered something hostile in deep space. The humans had been outnumbered, outgunned, and should have been destroyed. Instead, they had fought for 6 straight days, taken casualties that would have broken any other species, and somehow emerged victorious. The Defiance was returning home not as a defeated survivor, but as a wounded veteran of a successful campaign. Sir, the sensor operator said quietly, the approaching ship is hailing us. On the screen appeared a creature unlike anything in Galactic. Records, it was bipedal, relatively small, and covered in what appeared to be artificial skin, but its eyes held an intelligence that was both curious and calculating. Unknown vessel, came the transmission. You are in human-controlled space. State your intentions. Zexhari realized they had just made first contact with a species that the galaxy had completely underestimated. These weren't primitive beings. Playing with rockets? They were something far more dangerous, a warrior race that had learned to fight among the stars and they had been watching. The human ship that had hailed them was smaller than the Defiance, but somehow it made Captain Zexhari even more nervous. Where the damaged vessel looked like a floating fortress, this new arrival looked sleek and predatory. It moved with purpose, every line of its hull suggesting speed and lethality. Captain Rodriguez of the UES Stalker, came the voice from the human ship. You've been scanning one of our vessels for the past 2 hours. We'd like to know why? Zexhari's translator struggled with the human language. The tone suggested politeness, but something underneath felt like barely contained aggression. We are peaceful explorers, he replied carefully. We detected your vessel and were concerned it might need assistance. There was a pause that seemed to stretch forever. When the human captain spoke again, there was something that might have been amusement in his voice. The Defiance? She's tough. Takes more than a few holes to put her down permanently. A few holes? Zexhari looked at his tactical display again. The damaged ship showed impact craters that should have destroyed any vessel. What the humans casually called a few holes would have been catastrophic damage to any ship in the galactic fleet. With your permission, Captain Rodriguez continued, we'd like to send a boarding party to check on our people and assess the damage. Before Zexhari could respond, he watched in fascination as a small craft detached from the human ship. It was moving toward the Defiance, but what caught his attention was how it moved. The shuttle didn't follow smooth, efficient flight paths like civilized spacecraft. Instead, it moved in random patterns, never staying on the same course for more than a few seconds. They're flying evasively, his tactical officer observed. Even in friendly space, they assume someone might shoot at them. The boarding shuttle docked with the Defiance, and within minutes, Zexhari's sensors detected new activity aboard the damaged vessel. Lights began coming on in sections that had been dark. Systems that appeared dead suddenly showed signs of life. How are they doing that? Demanded his engineering officer. Our scans showed massive power failures throughout that ship. Maybe we were wrong about how badly damaged it really is, suggested the sensor operator, but they weren't wrong. As the Defiance slowly came back to life, the true extent of the damage became even more apparent. The humans weren't repairing the ship. They were working around the damage. Systems that should have required complete replacement were being bypassed, rerouted, or jury-rigged with equipment that seemed to come from nowhere. Sir, I'm detecting welding operations in 17 different sections, reported the engineering officer. They're literally rebuilding parts of their ship while we watch. Through the scanner, they could see human figures moving through the damaged corridors. What struck Zexhari as most disturbing was how casually they moved through areas that should have been lethal. Sections with no atmosphere, compartments filled with toxic gases, areas where radiation levels would kill most species within minutes. Captain, his science officer called out, I'm reading the biological data from the humans aboard that ship. Their physiology is unusual. The display showed detailed scans of the human crew. They were bipedal, roughly humanoid, but built in ways that defied galactic norms. Their bones were incredibly dense. Their muscle structure suggested enormous physical strength, and their cardiovascular system seemed designed to function under extreme stress. Look at these readings, the science officer continued. Their bodies are constantly producing chemicals that would be considered combat stimulants in most species. They're literally built for conflict. But the real revelation came when they analyzed the damage patterns on the Defiance more carefully. The initial scans had shown impact damage from weapons, but deeper analysis revealed something far more disturbing. Captain, these aren't just weapon impacts, the tactical officer reported, his voice shaking slightly. The damage patterns show the ship was boarded multiple times, and the humans fought hand-to-hand combat in the corridors. The scanner data painted a picture that was hard to believe. Sections of the ship showed evidence of close-quarters fighting. Bulkheads were scorched with energy weapons, but there were also impact marks from projectile weapons and what appeared to be primitive melee weapons. They fought with knives and clubs? Asked the navigation officer incredulously. When their advanced weapons failed, yes, confirmed the tactical officer. And sir, based on the biological residue in the corridors, they won. Zexhari felt sick. The idea of sentient beings engaging in personal combat was horrifying enough, but the thought that they might actually be good at it was terrifying. There's more, sir, the science officer continued. I'm detecting traces of medical procedures throughout the ship. Not just emergency treatment, actual surgery performed during combat. The humans were operating on their wounded while fighting off boarders. The bridge crew fell silent as they processed this information. The humans hadn't just survived being boarded by hostile forces. They had continued fighting while simultaneously trying to save their wounded comrades. Sir, incoming transmission from the human ship, announced the communications officer. Captain Rodriguez appeared on screen again. This time, Zexhari noticed details he had missed before. The human's clothing showed old stains that might have been blood. There were scars visible on his hands and face. Most disturbing of all, his eyes held the look of someone who had seen too much violence and had somehow learned to live with it. "Thank you for standing by while we checked on our people," Rodriguez said. "The Defiance will be operational within the hour. Her crew is eager to get home." "Captain," Zexhari found himself asking, "what happened to your ship?" Rodriguez's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "We encountered some unfriendly neighbors about a week out. Nothing we couldn't handle." "Nothing they couldn't handle?" The Defiance looked like it had been through a war. If this was their idea of a manageable encounter, what would they consider a serious threat? "How many of you were there?" Zexhari pressed. "3 ships in our patrol group," Rodriguez replied casually. "We ran into about 30 enemy vessels. Took us 6 days to clean them up." 6 days? 3 human ships against 30 enemies, and the humans spoke about it like discussing the weather. Zexhari's tactical computer ran quick calculations based on the damage patterns they'd observed. For 3 ships to defeat 30 opponents while taking damage like the Defiance had sustained, the humans would have had to fight with a level of ferocity that bordered on madness. "Your enemies," Zexhari asked carefully, "what happened to them?" For the first time, Rodriguez smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "They won't be bothering anyone else." The communication ended, leaving Zexhari and his crew staring at displays, showing impossible things. As they watched, the Defiance's engines came online. The ship that had appeared dead was now moving under its own power, following the stalker toward the inner system. "Captain," his sensor operator called out, "I'm detecting more ships moving in the system. They're coming from the direction of Earth." The tactical display updated, showing dozens of human vessels converging on their location. They moved in coordinated groups, their formation suggesting military precision. But what made Zexhari's blood run cold was the realization that these ships had been there all along. The humans had been watching from the moment the stellar wind entered their system. "Sir, we're being scanned," reported the tactical officer. "Multiple ships are running. Active sensors on us." The humans weren't just curious about the alien visitors, they were conducting a complete tactical assessment. Every system, every weapon, every weakness was being cataloged and analyzed. "Captain," came Rodriguez's voice again, "my superiors would like to invite you to visit Earth. They're very interested in meeting our new neighbors." It sounded like an invitation, but Zexhari understood the subtext. The humans weren't asking, they were politely demanding. Refusing would likely be seen as hostile, and after what he'd learned about human capabilities, that was the last thing he wanted. "We would be honored," Zexhari replied, hoping his fear didn't show in his voice as they followed the human escort toward Earth. One thought kept repeating in his mind. If this was what humanity considered a routine patrol encounter, what were they really capable of when they decided to fight seriously? The answer to that question would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. Captain Zexhari had never felt more uncomfortable in his life. The journey to Earth should have taken 6 hours, but the human escort kept changing course, forcing them to follow a winding path through what appeared to be empty space. It wasn't. Until his sensors detected massive energy signatures that he realized the truth, they were navigating through a minefield. "Sir," whispered his tactical officer, "I'm counting over 300 defensive platforms hidden throughout this system. Each one could destroy a battleship." The humans had turned their entire star system into a fortress. Every asteroid, every moon, every piece of space debris had been weaponized or turned into a sensor station. As they flew deeper into human territory, Zexhari began to understand that Earth wasn't just a planet. It was the center of a military machine that spanned the entire solar system. "Captain Rodriguez," Zexhari called over the communication channel, "your defenses are quite impressive." The human captain's laugh was unsettling. "Defenses? Oh, these aren't defenses. This is just the welcome mat. The real security measures are closer to Earth." Before Zexhari could ask what he meant, his communication officer received an urgent transmission from Galactic Command. The message was marked with the highest priority codes, something reserved for galactic emergencies. "Sir, Command is ordering us to maintain our position and await further instructions. They're sending Admiral Vorthak's entire fleet to our location. Zexari felt his stomach drop. Admiral Vorthak commanded the most powerful battle fleet in known space. If Command was sending him, they considered the situation a potential threat. To galactic security? Captain, came Rodriguez's voice again, we're receiving communications from multiple ships heading this way. About 50 vessels, traveling at maximum speed. Should we be concerned? The human knew exactly what was happening. Somehow, they had detected the approaching galactic fleet before Zexhari's own sensors had picked them up. The humans weren't just militaristic. They had surveillance capabilities that surpassed anything in the known galaxy. Those are our ships, Zexhari admitted. My government wants to ensure peaceful contact. 50 warships for peaceful contact? Rodriguez's tone was mild, but there was steel underneath. Interesting definition of peaceful. 8 hours later, Admiral Vorthak's fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Zexhari had served under the Admiral before, and knew him to be a brilliant tactical mind who had never lost a battle. If anyone could handle first contact with a potentially dangerous species, it was Vorthak. But within minutes of arriving, the Admiral's flagship was hailing the stellar wind with an emergency transmission. Zexhari, the Admiral's face appeared. On screen, and for the first time in 30 years of service, he looked genuinely shaken. What have you found here? Sir, we've made contact with the inhabitants of the third planet. They call themselves humans. Yes, we know about the humans, Vorthak said grimly. We've been analyzing your sensor data for the past 8 hours. Command has teams working around the clock trying to understand what we're dealing with. The Admiral's expression grew darker. Tell me, Captain, what do you know about human history? Very little, sir. They appear to be a warrior species with advanced military technology. Advanced? Vorthak laughed bitterly. Captain, their technology is primitive compared to ours. Their ships use chemical rockets, their weapons fire metal projectiles, and their computers are barely capable of basic calculations. Zexhari was confused. Then why do you seem concerned, sir? Because, Captain, we've been studying their planet for the past few hours. Do you know what we found? The main display shifted to show Earth from high orbit. At first glance, it looked like any other inhabited world, blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. But as the image zoomed in, details became visible that made Zexhari's blood run cold. Those dark patches across the continents, Vorthak explained, those aren't natural formations. They're the remains of cities that have been destroyed and rebuilt multiple times. Some areas show evidence of weapons that split atoms. Others show signs of biological warfare that killed millions. The image continued zooming, showing massive structures that could only be military installations. Weapons platforms, training facilities, manufacturing complexes that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Sir, Zexhari asked weakly, are they currently at war? No, Captain. This is what they look like during peacetime. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Everything they had seen, the militarized ships, the defensive systems, the casual attitude toward violence, this was humanity's normal state. They weren't a species that occasionally fought wars. They were a species that lived in a constant state of military readiness. How long have they been like this? Zexhari asked. Our analysis suggests they've been engaged in organized warfare for over 10,000 years, Vorthak replied. Captain, these beings have never known true peace. Their entire civilization is built around the concept of conflict. The Admiral continued, his voice growing more troubled. We've intercepted some of their communication networks. They have over 200 different nations on their planet, and they maintain detailed intelligence files on each other. They know exactly how to destroy their neighbors, and their neighbors know how to destroy them. But surely they must have some form of global government? Some authority that prevents total war? Vorthak's expression was grim. They do. It's called mutually assured destruction. They've built weapons so terrible that using them would kill everyone on the planet. The only thing preventing them from destroying themselves is the knowledge that any attack would result in their own annihilation. Zexhari felt sick. The humans had weaponized their own extinction and used it as a peacekeeping tool. There's more, the Admiral continued. We've analyzed their entertainment media, their stories, games, and historical records. Do you know what their favorite form of entertainment is? I'm afraid to ask. Simulated warfare. They create elaborate scenarios where they fight imaginary enemies, historical battles, and even each other. When they're not actually fighting, they practice fighting. When they're not practicing, they study how to fight better. The display showed images captured from human broadcasts. Children playing with toy weapons, adults gathering to watch simulated battles, massive arenas where humans competed in physical combat for entertainment. Sir, Zexhari's tactical officer interrupted, we're receiving multiple communications from the human fleet. They're asking if Admiral Vorthak would like to visit Earth personally. Vorthak was quiet for a long moment. They know who I am? Yes, sir. They addressed you by name and rank. The implications were terrifying. The humans had identified the Admiral's flagship, accessed galactic military databases to determine his identity, and done it all while maintaining friendly communications. Their intelligence capabilities were far beyond anything the galaxy had encountered. Admiral, came a new voice over the communication channel. This human sounded older, more authoritative. I'm General Harrison, Commander of Earth Defense Forces. We understand you have concerns about our capabilities. We'd like the opportunity to discuss mutual cooperation. Vorthak composed himself before responding. General Harrison, we appreciate your invitation. However, we must follow certain protocols when making first contact with new species. Of course, Harrison replied smoothly. We've actually studied your protocols, quite thorough. We have similar procedures for first contact situations. The casual admission that humans had somehow obtained classified galactic protocols sent chills through both bridge crews. General, Vorthak asked carefully, how long have you been aware of our existence? There was a pause. When Harrison spoke, again there was amusement in his voice. Admiral, we've been tracking your ships for about 3 years now. We were wondering when you'd finally work up the courage to say hello. 3 years. The humans had been watching them for 3 years and hadn't made contact. They had studied galactic technology, learned their protocols, and patiently waited for the aliens to make the first move. Sir, Zexhari's science officer called out urgently. I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the system. The humans are powering up weapons platforms. General, Vorthak said quickly, we notice increased military activity. Is there a problem? Not at all, Harrison replied calmly. We're just making sure you feel properly welcomed. 50 warships is quite a show of force. We thought we'd respond in kind. On the tactical display, hundreds of weapon platforms came online throughout the solar system. The humans hadn't just been monitoring the galactic fleet, they had been preparing to destroy it if necessary. Admiral, Harrison continued, we should probably mention that we've been in contact with some of your other species as well. The Corval Empire, the Theta Consortium, the Free Worlds Alliance. They've all sent similar fleets to various human colonies? Admiral Vorthak felt the universe shifting beneath his feet. General, how many worlds do you control? Control is such a strong word, Harrison replied. We prefer to think of it as places where humans live. Currently. That's about 47 star systems. General Harrison's invitation to Earth came with coordinates to a massive space station orbiting the planet. As Admiral Vorthak's shuttle approached the structure, he couldn't help but notice it looked more like a fortress than a diplomatic facility. The station bristled with weapons, sensor arrays, and docking bays large enough to service entire fleets. Admiral, his aide whispered nervously, are you sure this is wise? We're putting ourselves completely at their mercy. Vorthak had been asking himself the same question for the past 6 hours. But the alternative, returning to Galactic Command, without understanding what humanity truly represented, seemed even more dangerous. The docking bay they entered was enormous. easily 10 times larger than anything on a galactic vessel. As their shuttle settled onto the deck, Vorthak noticed something that made his blood run cold. The bay wasn't empty. Dozens of different spacecraft filled the space, representing at least 15 different alien species. "Sir," his pilot called out, "those ships. I recognize some of them. That's a Corval destroyer, there's a Xanthari cruiser, and that large vessel appears to be from the hegemony." The humans hadn't just been watching the Galactic Empire. They had been making contact with every major power in known space, and somehow they had convinced representatives from all of them to come here. General Harrison met them at the airlock. He was older than Captain Rodriguez, with gray hair and numerous scars visible on his hands and face. But what struck Vorthak most was the man's eyes. They held the calm confidence of someone who had seen every possible threat and learned how to handle it. "Admiral Vorthak," Harrison said, extending his hand in what appeared to be a human greeting gesture. "Welcome to Unity Station. I hope your journey wasn't too uncomfortable." As they walked through the station's corridors, Vorthak noticed details that reinforced his growing unease. The walls were thick enough to withstand heavy weapons fire. Emergency bulkheads could seal off sections instantly. Even the decorative plants were positioned to provide cover during combat. "General," Vorthak asked, "how long has this station been here?" "We finished construction about 18 months ago," Harrison replied casually. "Seemed like we'd need a neutral meeting place once we started talking to our neighbors." 18 months? The humans had built this massive facility in less than 2 years, and no one in the galaxy had detected it. Their construction capabilities were as impressive as their military technology. They entered a large conference room, where representatives from a dozen different species were already seated. Vorthak recognized most of them: ambassadors, military commanders, and intelligence officials from every major galactic power. They all had the same expression he felt on his own face: barely controlled fear. "Gentlemen and ladies," Harrison addressed the room, "now that Admiral Vorthak has joined us, we can begin our discussion. I believe you all have questions about humanity's capabilities and intentions." Ambassador Krell of the Corval Empire spoke first. His species was known for their aggressive nature and powerful military, but even he seemed subdued. "General Harrison, our analysis of your planet suggests your species has been engaged in continuous warfare for millennia. How can we trust that? You won't bring that violence to the stars?" Harrison smiled, but it wasn't a reassuring expression. "Ambassador, I think you misunderstand something fundamental about humanity. We don't bring violence to places. Violence follows us because we refuse to surrender to it." He gestured to a large display that showed images from human history: battles, wars, conflicts spanning thousands of years. But as the images progressed, something became clear that Vorthak hadn't expected. "Every conflict you see here," Harrison explained, "was started by humans who believed they could conquer other humans, and every single one of those aggressors eventually lost. Not because they lacked strength or weapons, but because they underestimated their enemy's will to survive." The display showed the pattern repeating over and over. Empires that seemed unstoppable would expand across continents, conquering everything in their path. Then they would encounter humans who refused to be conquered, and the seemingly unstoppable force would slowly grind itself to pieces against immovable resistance. "Humans don't fight to conquer," Harrison continued. "We fight to protect what we love. And we've learned that the only way to truly protect something is to be so dangerous that no one dares threaten it." Commander Zenth of the hegemony leaned forward. "General, we've analyzed the damaged ship that led to first contact. Our experts believe it engaged a force 50 times its size and somehow survived. How is that possible?" The Defiance incident," Harrison nodded. "That's actually a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Captain Chain and his crew weren't trying to conquer anyone. They were investigating reports of slavers operating in that region." The room fell silent. Slavery was illegal throughout the galaxy, but it still existed in remote areas where enforcement was difficult. "The slavers had established a base in an asteroid field," Harrison continued. They had taken several hundred civilians from various species. Captain Chen's small patrol group found them by accident. Images appeared on the display showing the battle. 3 small human ships facing a massive fleet of pirate vessels in a complex asteroid field. The slavers demanded that our ships leave or be destroyed. Captain Chen's response was to ask them to surrender the civilians and they would be allowed to leave with their lives. 3 ships against 50? Asked Ambassador Krell. That's either courage or madness. In humanity's experience, Harrison replied, there's rarely a difference between the two. The battle footage was unlike anything Vorthak had ever seen. The human ships didn't fight like civilized beings. They used the asteroids as weapons, ramming slaver vessels into rocks. They coordinated their attacks with split-second timing, appearing from behind cover to strike and then vanishing before return fire could find them. The slavers had superior numbers and firepower, Harrison explained. But they made a critical error. They tried to use the captured civilians as hostages. The display showed what happened next. The 3 human ships suddenly changed tactics, becoming even more aggressive. They stopped trying to preserve themselves and focused entirely on destroying the enemy vessels holding prisoners. That's when the slavers learned something important about humanity, Harrison said quietly. When you threaten our people, we don't become more cautious. We become exponentially more dangerous. The battle lasted 6 days. The humans took devastating casualties, with the Defiance suffering the worst damage. But they never retreated, never considered surrender, and never stopped fighting until every slaver ship was destroyed and every civilian was rescued. The truly remarkable thing, Harrison added, wasn't that they won. It was that Captain Chen's report listed the mission as a routine patrol action. He didn't even request a commendation for his crew. Vorthak felt sick. To humans, a 3 against 50 battle that lasted nearly a week was routine. General, he asked weakly, how many of these routine actions occur? Harrison consulted a datapad. This month? About 47 reported incidents. Pirates, slavers, territorial disputes, rescue operations. Nothing too serious. 47 military actions in 1 month, and the humans considered it a quiet period. But General, pressed Commander Zenth, surely your people must suffer psychological trauma from all this violence? How do they function in normal society? Harrison's expression grew thoughtful. Commander, I think you're making an assumption. About human psychology, we don't see violence as abnormal. We see it as one tool among many for solving problems. The key is knowing when to use it and when to choose other options. He activated another display showing human cities. They were beautiful, peaceful places where millions of people lived and worked without any sign of the military culture that dominated their space operations. These same people who fight pirates in space also write poetry, compose music, fall in love, raise children, and dream of better futures. The capacity for violence doesn't eliminate our capacity for everything else. It protects it. Ambassador Krell asked the question that everyone was thinking. General, what do you want from U.S.? Why reveal yourselves now? Harrison was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made everyone in the room pay attention. Because, Ambassador, we've been watching all of you for several years now. We've seen how your civilizations operate, how you handle conflicts, how you treat your own people and others. And we've realized something troubling. He stood up, walking to a window that showed the stars beyond. You're all afraid of war, so afraid that you've forgotten how to fight effectively. Your militaries are ceremonial, your strategies are outdated, and your people have no idea how to respond to real threats. The room erupted in protests, but Harrison raised his hand for silence. 3 months ago, long-range scouts detected something coming from outside the galaxy. Something big, organized, and definitely hostile. They'll reach the outer rim in approximately 2 years. The display showed deep space sensor readings that made no sense to most of the species present. We could handle this threat ourselves, Harrison continued, but we'd prefer to work together. Because when this new enemy arrives, the The silence in the conference room stretched for what felt like an eternity. Admiral Vorthak stared at the deep space sensor readings, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. The data showed massive structures moving through the void between galaxies, structures so large they dwarfed entire star systems. General Harrison, Ambassador Krell finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. How certain are you about this threat? Harrison touched a control on the table, and the display shifted to show more detailed analysis. We've been tracking them for 8 months. Our deep space monitoring stations have confirmed their trajectory, speed, and approximate size. They'll reach the outer rim systems in 22 months. Commander Zenth leaned forward, studying the data. These readings, they suggest artificial constructs. Ships of some kind, but larger than anything we've ever imagined. Not ships, Harrison corrected grimly. Worlds. Mobile planets converted into weapons platforms. Each one carries enough firepower to sterilize an entire star system. The representatives from various species exchanged horrified glances. The scale of the threat was beyond anything their civilizations had ever contemplated. How many? Asked Vorthak, though he dreaded the answer. Our best estimate is 47 mobile battle worlds, plus approximately 3,000 support vessels of various sizes. The numbers were staggering. Even if every military force in the galaxy worked together, they would be hopelessly outnumbered and outgunned. General, Ambassador Krell said slowly, you mentioned that humanity could handle this threat alone. How? Harrison's expression grew darker. By doing what humans have always done when faced with impossible odds. We'd make the cost of victory so high that winning wouldn't be worth it. He activated another display showing human military installations throughout their 47 colonies. Every world was heavily fortified, with weapons platforms, underground bunkers, and defensive systems that could turn entire planets into fortress worlds. We'd fight them at every system, on every world, in every corridor and room if necessary. We'd make them pay for every meter of space they tried to take. Eventually, they'd either give up or destroy themselves trying to finish us. But, Vorthak protested, that would mean the extinction of your species. Probably, Harrison agreed calmly. But it would also mean the survival of everyone else. Sometimes that's the best outcome you can hope for. The casual way he discussed species suicide sent chills through the room. This wasn't bravado or empty threats. Harrison was stating a simple tactical assessment that humanity had apparently already accepted. However, Harrison continued, we'd prefer a different approach. One where everyone survives and the threat is eliminated permanently. He gestured to another display showing detailed tactical projections. Our analysis suggests that if we work together, we can not only stop this invasion but ensure it never happens again. The plan that unfolded was unlike anything the galactic powers had ever conceived. It wasn't just about defeating the invaders, it was about fundamentally changing how the galaxy approached security and defense. The problem with your current military structures, Harrison explained, is that they're designed for policing, not warfare. You've built beautiful ships for patrol duties and ceremonial functions, but nothing that can stand against a determined enemy. Images showed the sleek, elegant vessels used by various galactic fleets. They were marvels of engineering and artistry, but as Harrison's analysis revealed, they were also completely inadequate for actual combat. We propose a joint defense initiative, Harrison continued. Every species contributes according to their strengths. The Corvals provide their manufacturing capabilities, the hegemony offers their advanced sensors, the Galactic Empire supplies logistics coordination, and so on. And what do humans contribute? Asked Commander Zenth. Harrison's smile was grim. We teach you how to fight. The proposal was breathtaking in its scope. Humans would redesign every military vessel in the galaxy, retrain every officer and soldier, and completely restructure how galactic defense operated. It would mean abandoning thousands of years of peaceful development in favor of militarization on a scale never before seen. The transformation would take approximately 18 months, Harrison explained. Just enough time to be ready when they arrive, Ambassador Krell raised an obvious concern. General, how do we know that once we've militarized our entire galaxy, under human guidance, you won't simply conquer us yourselves? The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Everyone in the room had been thinking it, but Krell was the first to voice it directly. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, then activated a final display. It showed Earth as seen from orbit, but this time the image focused on something different. Massive structures that were clearly not military installations. Ambassador, let me show you something we haven't discussed yet. The structures were enormous, clearly requiring vast resources and years of construction. But instead of weapons or fortifications, they appeared to be something else entirely. These are generation ships, Harrison explained. We began building them 50 years ago. Each one can carry 10 million humans and everything needed to establish a new civilization. Vorthak felt his understanding of humanity shift once again. You're planning to leave? We're planning to survive? Harrison corrected. If this galaxy becomes uninhabitable for any reason, invasion, natural disaster, or simply because we've made too many enemies, we want our children to have somewhere else to go. The implications were staggering. Humans weren't interested in galactic conquest because they had already prepared to abandon the galaxy entirely if necessary. We've identified 17 suitable galaxies within range of our generation ships. Harrison continued. Each fleet carries enough genetic diversity and technology to rebuild human civilization from scratch. If we leave, we won't be coming back. But why show us this? Asked Commander Zenth. Because, Harrison replied, we'd rather not leave. We like it here. The galaxy is beautiful, full of interesting species and amazing cultures. But we won't stay if it means watching everything we care about get destroyed. The choice he was presenting was clear. Work with humanity to build an effective defense against the coming invasion, or watch as humans simply packed up and left. The galaxy to face its doom alone? The generation ships will be ready to launch in 6 months, Harrison added. That gives you time to decide whether you want us as allies in this fight or prefer to handle the invasion yourselves. Ambassador, Krell spoke for everyone when he asked, what guarantee do we have that humans won't abuse the military power we're giving them? Harrison stood up and walked back to the window showing the stars. Ambassador, in the past 50 years, humanity has had the capability to conquer any species in this galaxy. Our technology may be primitive by your standards, but our willingness to use it effectively makes us essentially unstoppable. He turned back to face the room. We could have taken over the galaxy decades ago. Instead, we've spent that time building escape routes and preparing to leave peacefully. Does that sound like the behavior of a conquering species? The logic was undeniable. If humans wanted to rule the galaxy, they already would have done it. However, Harrison continued, I understand your concerns. So we're proposing something unprecedented in galactic history. The final display showed a document unlike anything the assembled representatives had ever seen. It was a treaty, but not between governments or species. It was a contract between humanity and every other sentient species in the galaxy. A mutual defense compact, Harrison explained. Every species pledges to defend every other species against external threats. No conquests, no territorial expansion, no subjugation of other worlds. Just mutual protection and cooperation. And if someone violates this compact, asked Vorthak, then everyone else combines forces to stop them, Harrison replied simply, including us. The beauty of the proposal was its simplicity. Humanity was volunteering to become part of a system that would prevent them from conquering anyone, while simultaneously offering to protect everyone from external threats. The choice is yours, Harrison said as he prepared to leave the room. Work together and build something stronger than any of us could create alone or face the coming darkness separately. As the human general walked toward the door, he paused and looked back. One final thing to consider. We've been monitoring the approaching fleet. They've encountered 3 other galaxies on their way here. Our deep space telescopes can show you what those galaxies look like now. The final image that appeared on the display was the most terrifying thing any of them had ever seen. 3 distant galaxies, once bright with the light of billions of stars, now dark and lifeless. Not destroyed. Simply empty, as if all life had been systematically harvested. You have 6 months to decide, Harrison said quietly. Choose wisely. After he left, the representatives sat in stunned silence, staring at the images of dead galaxies and trying to comprehend the magnitude of what they faced. Finally, Admiral Vorthak spoke the words that everyone was thinking. We're going to need. The humans, the age of galactic innocence was over. The time for learning how to fight had begun.